fun. But first, I want to talk about this. So I'm going to jump into this article real quick, everybody. Um, we were talking about retirement and stuff like that not too long ago. I mean, we're finance people. We talk about this a lot. But I saw this article recently from Yahoo Finance. So it just says many people retire in debt. Here's how to manage it, kind of thing. And I just kind of wanted to look at it real quick. So they talk about the different things you can do in retirement. And, generally, in Finance Week, there's like 4 or 5 things you can do if you're not meeting your retirement goal, right? So if I want to retire at 65, let's say, and I got to figure, okay, I need probably about this much money to do that, and at my standard of living, right, or the standard of living I want. Um, but I'm not going to hit my goal. I can either decide to work longer. I could try to make more money, if that's possible. I could try to invest my money more aggressively and hope it makes more money, but that's risky because it could also lose more money, and then that puts me off even longer. Um, or I could do something like adjust down and go, okay, well, maybe I can live on less. Or I just have to go, well, maybe I can live part time or work part time or something like that. So I've got to find some way to manage that. So they talk about that a little bit in here. But um, basically, mortgage and credit card debt are a cold reality for over a quarter of retirees. So that's what people are talking about, people retiring and they have some credit or some mortgage debt. Um, Credit debt when you retire is probably not great because credit cards are high interest. I don't I don't know that I'd call mortgage debt a huge issue in retirement unless your mortgage is really high. I don't know if you have opinions about that, Lacey, or if you've dealt with that.
Well, you know what? I from having clients in both categories, the ones that don't have mortgage debt have a much smoother sailing time in their retirement for
Sure.
sure. I don't know problem. I don't know if I call it a huge problem per se, but I'd like to not have mortgage debt in my retirement, and
Absolutely.
I find my clients have a better time when they don't. However, in the scheme of things, if you can plan for it, if you're able to plan for it, and how much longer is it going to be around, and is it a huge debt or not? Did you buy your home back when they were more affordable and the payment's still pretty low?
Right. Right. If you're somebody you bought your home 10 years ago and you've got an interest rate of like 4%, it's probably not a big deal. If you bought it recently and your interest rate's 7%, you might want to think about refinancing or doing something different. But I just wanted to jump in. So they're just doing this, but they talk about many people are feeling the financial heat with inflation, which may be exacerbating the debt some retirees are still carrying. Um, that's sort of so they get into the findings. The sober findings: nearly 2/3 of retirees expect to be less financially secure than their parents and grandparents were in their retirements, and 1 in 5 fret about making payments on their monthly bills right now. So these are the kinds of concerns that are making that cause people to make short-sighted decisions based on emotion. That has serious implications for retirement that might stretch 3 decades, but there are strategies to implement to chip away at your debt and preserve your nest egg. So just 26% are still paying off mortgages. 25% are still paying down credit card debt. Um, I would do
Yeah, I
this.
don't like that one.
Yeah,
I don't like that one,
the second one is a concern. Um,
right?
yeah, you want to get rid of your credit debt before you retire, if you can.
Variable interest rates, those can go up and down.
Right.
Yeah, those payments go out of control.
Now, let's say you're getting to that age, you need to retire, you can't work anymore, and you have a substantial amount of credit card debt. Um, most financial people don't like to say this, but this is something that like you should consider is bankruptcy. If you can wipe out some of that credit debt, or at least get it to a more manageable payment um, through bankruptcy, that might be a way to go. And at that point, you got to figure you're 60 whatever years old when you're retiring. Do you really plan on buying another place or making a big purchase? Do you really need the credit score to be in that position, or could you suffer 7 years of bankruptcy? And if that helps get rid of the credit debt and makes it more manageable, that might be the way to go. But once again, now we're talking about you're having to lower your standard of living in retirement from where you want it to be. So one of those five options. Um, so that would be the first one I would say. Mortgage, I wouldn't be as concerned about. The other thing I would say is this about the mortgage, because I've done this a lot. Because people tend to, it's like, okay, you're 60 something, you're getting ready to retire, and you're sitting down with the client, and then you're like, okay, you have this 3,500 square foot house, right? And maybe they got a great deal on it at the time, but it's like, it's huge, it costs a lot to maintain, you've got to hire a maid because you're getting too old to clean it, right? And you've got 5 bedrooms, and 3 of them you aren't using. I had a couple that had a 3-story house, and the wife was telling me, she's like, yeah, the first floor was lower, they were on the side of a hill. She's like, I haven't been down to the first floor or the third floor in like a year. I'm like, you just living in the second floor, right? I'm like, so why don't you just get a really nice condo for a lower price, cash some of the equity, and use that to retire on?
Listen, people are all hell bent on land. They like to have the dirt underneath them, but do not discount the idea of a condo. As somebody who's, lived in New York City for many years, there are benefits to not actually having to own the dirt underneath you, because you don't have to maintain the dirt.
Right.
So much of the building's maintenance, you're paying a monthly fee for it, but you don't have to worry about coordinating or doing that maintenance yourself. You really only have to worry about that when it comes to stuff inside the walls. And sometimes even then, the condo or co-op has people that do that, and you sort of just get charged for it.
Absolutely.
So you can make your own life so much easier and make being independent easier and less stressful.
Absolutely. The other thing I would say too is this: part of the concern about inflation, and I understand it, is because I don't think Social Security is not been keeping up. So like, just to give you a real basic example, so like my grandparents were now like, God, 80s, 90s, whatever. When they retired, for every dollar they put in Social Security, they got like $1.30 back out of it. Right, for the average person. Now my parents are retiring. For every dollar they put in it, they get pretty much $1 back with maybe some change, maybe 1 or 2 cents. When Lacey and I get to that point of retirement, we might get 70 cents on the dollar. And that's just because Social Security has not kept up with inflation. So I understand that concern, and I understand why, like, boomers today that are retiring are going, well, my parents had it easier. Yeah, because Social Security went further. Right?
Right.
And you didn't need as much stuff, because back then you didn't need to have a computer, and people didn't have cable and streaming services and all this stuff. So there wasn't all these other accoutrements you had to buy. But yeah, that's I could see that concern, but at the same time, inflation's not really going to be the big issue. Is it what your monthly check going to be keeping up, and do you have enough money to keep it up? Right. I don't think inflation's going to get rampant and run out of control. It's pretty much averaged around 3.5% forever over time. I mean, you'll see bumps and up and downs, but for the most part, it's pretty predictable. But yeah, I mean, the retiring and debt thing, this guy's going to do the basic, success porn guru thing where it's just, rein in your spending, keep working longer, it's just stuff I was saying. Tap into your retirement accounts to pay off your debt. I really, 90% of the time, I disagree with this. Why would you do that and get rid of your savings? Redo your budget. The reason I disagree with it, and I've seen people do this, where, okay, I've got, I'll give you a great example. It wasn't a client, it was a potential client. I was a big Dave Ramsey fan, and she inherited some money from an aunt, and it was like $100,000. She had a real nice house. It was, not ultra expensive, but she owed about $100,000 on the house. And her husband had just recently retired because he had a triple bypass for heart surgery. and he couldn't work anymore. And she was only going to work like another year or two part time. And I said, she was like, well, what should I do? Because pretty much their whole retirement savings was the little pension he had, and the 100,000 she got from the aunt, and then whatever they got at Social Security. And so I was telling her, well, I would bank that 100,000 and just pay off the mortgage, because it's a small mortgage, and just keep paying it and going forward, and you should be fine. I mean, it'll be tight, but you should be fine. And she was like, well, but I watched Dave Ramsey, and he says I should pay off the house and pay off the house. And I kept telling her, don't do that, right? And so that's what she did. She paid. She didn't listen to me. She paid off the house, and then I didn't hear from her. And then a year later, she calls me, and her husband is back at the hospital, needs another massive surgery, but her insurance doesn't cover it, right? Because it was an experimental surgery. So he could either take the drugs that the insurance covered, which he might live a year or two, or he could do the surgery and he'd probably live 9 or 10 more years, right? And she doesn't have the money because she put it all in the house. And I was telling her, well, your only option now is either let your husband die or sell the house.
Yeah, see, I am pro pay off the house, but if it drains everything you have.
Yeah, you don't drain your emergency money. You don't, and your retirement money, that you got to live on that money. So it's better to have it in a liquid form that you can get a hold of instead of putting it into a property like that. Because now you're stuck in a position of, well, now I got to get rid of the property.
Right.
So
yeah, that's not the situation. I'm in favor of paying off your house, but you also have to look at your finances a little more holistically, and you need to look and go, okay, can I pay off the house and still have a liquid emergency fund and not have like drained my retirement account? Like, can I pay off the house without greatly disrupting those other things? You know, and if the answer is yes, I say do that deal all day long. But if you're going to do damage to those other two areas, I would definitely stop and rethink it.
Yeah, when you got to do the trick to being a part of the reason you're a financial advisor, if you guys have one, if you have a good one, they're going to ask you a lot of questions about your personal life and your habits and your choices, and they're going to want to have these long conversations with you. And the reason is because while we're doing that, we're taking notes and going, okay, well, husband had a triple bypass. Tell me about that. What are the odds he's going to be back in the hospital? Does your insurance cover everything? I need to know all this, because if that happens, I need to have a plan. Right?
Right.
So you got to think about those things. It's like, I have the huge house. Well, what's the maintenance on the house? Did you factor that in to your budget? Because maybe your huge house, you got to have it, repainted soon, or you got to do all this stuff, or, you've got to pay somebody to come in and do the yard. And that's another whatever, $5,000 or $6,000 a year, $10,000 a year, just on maintaining the freaking home. Is it worth it? Right? Like Lacey said, with the condo, it's less to maintain. It's really casual.
Love their dirt, and they don't love maintenance fees, but you have to pay a water bill anyway. You have to pay all those other things anyway. You might as well get somebody else doing a lot of the work for you in the process,
Absolutely. So that was just kind of our looking at that. For retiring, the things to think about. Retiring in debt, not terrible. Just make sure that you have a handle on how you're going to pay it. That's the big key takeaway. And it is always one of those 5 things. You're either going to have to work longer, make more, invest more aggressively, which is usually not a good idea, adjust your retirement plans to your cost of living, or, do what a lot of people I know do is they, instead of keeping the big house, get rid of the house and maybe work part-time in retirement. And a lot of people work part-time in retirement, not because they have to, but because otherwise they'd just be bored. I mean, most of my clients.
Nice to have a bit of a schedule. Sometimes a lack of a schedule can make people feel like they're kind of all over the place. So it's good for having a schedule. And it's got the benefit, even if you don't really need the money, it can, in case of emergencies, it can help sort of keep your burn rate a little bit lower. You're Absolutely. Burning through less every month. Right. And so if some emergency pops up, you might have helped yourself out in the future a little more.
Right. Even if you're only making $1,000 a month or something, working 10 hours a week, I mean, whatever it is, or 20 hours a week. So yeah, just fun things to think about.